Welcome back to Turn Down for What, your source for EV news and updates. Like and subscribe for more content like this episode. Let's dive on in.
Welcome back to Turn Down for What? Another day.
Another episode.
There we go. Thank you, Chris. Well, today we're kind of following up on last week's episode. I realized that the entire episode I was speaking into my mic, but I had the camera as my mic source, and so it all sounded. It was like I was like, why does that sound so distant? And I found out that I had not programmed that correctly. So today I'm in the microphone, and hopefully that sounds better. Anyways, today we're following up on last week's conversation. Obviously, last week we did a little bit of a live stream, kind of discussing some of the changes that are taking place on the federal level and how that shifts into EV priority in the nation. And subsequent to that, we had some news coming out of Ford that we wanted to kind of talk about. One, well, we were going to talk about the earnings call and kind of some of the key insights that were taken away from that. And secondly, they released their 2025, some of the changes that will take place in their 2025 Lightning lineup. And we're going to kind of talk about some of those things. So stay tuned, strap in, and let's dive on in. So, Chris, kick us off.
Yeah, it was one of those earning calls like we've seen from Ford, where it's kind of two sides of it. On the positive side, they had record revenues. They had great profits. They're paying out their 15 cents a share dividend, as well as an additional 15% bonus dividend. So for those that are shareholders, that's nice. On March, I think 3rd or 5th, those will hit. And so yeah, on that end, the earnings looked really good, and then the price kind of tanked, and it's like, well, why? Why did they tank? What the heck just happened? Well, then they offered guidance that 2025 was gonna come up lower than 24 on both the revenue side and on the expense side, and so the future for 2025 is looking a little bit rough. I think, Ford, and I think all the OEMs do this. It's very interesting how their sales model works. So in Q1 of 2024, I don't know if everybody remembers last year, but they basically had no revenue when it came to the EV side. And it's going to be like that, similar, I think, this year, because, they pumped a whole bunch of inventory out of the end of December. They had big numbers for Mach-E and did really well in general in the BEV space with even E-Transit and Lightning coming in with record sales for the Lightning. So that's all, a combination of dealer inventory and stuff that's coming off of their kind of regional lots. Tim Bartz at Long MacArthur Ford talks about this, that every region has these regional lots, and then they might be a couple days away and they'll bring them into the dealer. So it's a mix of that. And then, there was some shutdown of production at the end of the year. Some of it is normal around the holidays on the assembly line. Some of it is was extended out. And so they are just now, what we'll talk about in the second half of the podcast, getting orders going, retail orders going for the F-150 Lightning 2025. And there's some changes there that we'll get into for sure. But those sales, aren't they're not even going to be manufactured until March, and then they're going to be delivered later in the year. So your Q1 sales might be really soft when it comes to the BEV side. And obviously the BEV is a tiny percentage of their revenue in general. They're talking about kind of a softer environment for these vehicles. So they kind of gave that guidance, and they were still going to be profitable, but it's just, it's going to be, a couple billion less than what it was the year before. So talked a lot about cost controls, huge pivot on EVs that we'll get into here. And I've got a bunch of clips from kind of pulled the best of out of the hour-long call. Pivot. Yeah, it was a huge pivot, I think. I mean, they've hinted at this for quite some time. We know Jim went out to China, drove some of the stuff out there with the Xiaomi, and was had it shipped to Detroit. And we know that Ford had really great aspirations. This is the big thing about 2 years. For the 2-year mark for me is an interesting. If you look back 2 years ago, what we were talking about was Toyota doesn't get it, Chevy is lost, Ford's going to be right there in the mix. Man, they really understand it. T3 is coming. The next gen of software is coming. These guys are on top of it. And there's this ex Tesla and Apple employee, Doug Field, This dude, they mentioned him on the call. His software prowess is legend in the business. Dude, they're on the way, man. They're right there. They're going to be in the fight. 2 years later, here we are, doggy paddling, with the same products, and the other one is 2 years away. So if you just think about that, like how far 2 years from now is, if you look back at how far 2 years previous was, it's a long time. So
I mean, they launched the Lightning a little over 2 years ago. I mean, that's in perspective. I mean, they just got into there's a lot that can happen in 2 full fiscal years of a business.
Yeah,
well, and that's one thing, Josh and I, when we look at these vehicles that are coming out today and compare them to what's out there, we have a good vehicle to compare it with. Our truck, when we got it, was that year one truck. It was within the first month of these trucks coming out. I still love mine. I think it's good for what it was, but now it's a 2.5, almost 3 year truck with 4 years of design work. So that's where we're getting into our next thing, Chris. I have this truck, which is a Lariat extended range, 132 kilowatt battery. So for me as a Ford person, I'm going to look at you and say, okay, so they're going to tell us what's coming out. Obviously, it's going to be better than the last one because you don't want to make a truck worse than your last one. So tell us, are we getting a better truck based on what the earnings and the reports were?
Yeah, I'm going to say in the short term, you're not. And in the long term, you're going to get a different truck. And it's going to depend on the market it's in, because they really talked about going from a dedicated battery electric platform into a mixed platform. Now, the good news, it's still going to be focused on electric. So this platform is going to be a mix of plug-in hybrid, full electric, and the kind of the big hot one, right, is EREV. What Scout's doing, what China has done for a long time. When people talk, and Jim talks about that, when you go to China and you talk about electric, they consider EREV electric, regardless of whether or not it has that hybrid, series hybrid powertrain in it. When they say electric, they include that. So, some of the numbers, they'll talk about BYD is right there with Tesla, or is overtaken Tesla in electric. If you break out pure electric from the series hybrid, they're still not. A lot of BYD sales are the series hybrid EREVs, and that is ubiquitous with the term electric, because the powertrain and the drive style and the software is all still very electric. And I think that was a takeaway Jim had, and so we'll kind of jump into that, because he separates out fleet and consumer and all these different platforms. So I guess let's play that clip to start off. It'll give you guys some context to kind of where his mind is on that.
I want to touch on our EV strategy, since it's so critical for any car company. We're on course. We're deep in the development of our next generation of vehicles that we believe will be affordable, high volume, and great for our business. On the U.S. retail side, the sweet spot that has emerged is small and medium-sized trucks and utilities. These vehicles' use case fits perfectly for EVs, daily commuters, well suited as a second vehicle in the household. They require smaller, much lower cost batteries. These vehicles can be offered at lower prices to help adoption of EVs for the customers who really appreciate their lower operating cost. But for larger retail electric utilities, the economics are unresolvable. These customers have very demanding use cases for an electric vehicle. They tow, they go off-road, they take long road trips. These vehicles have worse aerodynamics, and they're very heavy, which means very large and expensive batteries. Retail customers have shown that they will not pay any premium for these large EVs, making them a really tough business case given the expense in the batteries. For Ford, our commercial customers do show potential for large EVs. They're willing to pay a premium over ICE because they can really measure the TCO advantages of EV, and they can live with depot charging. They don't have the same range anxiety that retail customers have. Profitability for these larger family haulers that take long trips will be more frequently occurred through partial electric options. Yes, PHEV, but especially hybrid and EREVs that on one tank of gas can get over 700 miles of range, but still drive most miles all electric. Ford will be developing flexible body-on-frame and unit body platforms that will be designed for these multi-energy powertrains that are needed given the realities of customer affordability and range requirements.
Guys, man, that's like the most powerful 2 minutes I've heard out of Ford in the last 2 years. I mean, there's so much to unpack there. I don't know if you remember when I had the Loaner STX and I made a whole video about, gas versus electric. And the thing that stood out to me when I got in is that the range was 700 miles. And that's exactly what he mentions, right? That with these series hybrids, you can go 700 miles. And he almost it almost breaks my heart to hear Jim talk this way, because he refers to the electric vehicle as the second car. He refers to it as consumers are just not going to pay what we need to charge to make it profitable. Fleets will, because, like in my 9 to 5, I know exactly how many miles I need to go on the route or on my normal day. I know it's going to come back to the depot or the yard to charge overnight. I know I'm going to depreciate over time. I know that I'm not bringing it in for oil change service, and I can get that ROI back on the fleet side. So I see the big trucks like ours being more focused on municipalities, governments, parks, businesses, the trades, just like the e-transit, and that being still a component, still making things like ours. But if there's a consumer version, you're talking Lariat and above. Like there's just no market. They're basically saying there's no market. And I think even Cybertruck is running up to this at some extent. None of these trucks are selling more than 50,000 of anything at this price point. Not X, not S, not Rivian, not Cybertruck. We'll see when Cybertruck drops the price, but Tesla, it's not like they're rolling out $60,000 Cybertrucks today, and there's a reason for that. So
yeah, I think that the important takeaway though is, and one of the things that they mentioned was the demand is for smaller and cheaper. And you're seeing that with the Tesla is that's what's big. And that's why we had kind of had the thought and feeling that T3 might go more towards the Rivian, Ranger style size vehicle, because the battery can be smaller to get the same type of range, which makes it cheaper to make and you can deliver more units. The issue that we've seen is all these OEMs are coming out with the big and flashy of here's our $120,000 entry into the market. And even in the gas powered space, that type of market doesn't do that well, but they're expecting, the traditional $50,000 truck buyer to be like, oh, well, it's EV, it's less operational. Let's spend $100,000 on this truck. And there is a market for those. But I mean, if you look at, I think the gas powered market, I'd have to do a study on it. I'm sure those mega platinum trims don't sell 100,000 a quarter. They're selling the majority of those pro XLT style trims, but the XLT is the price of a gas platinum. And so it's the cost, which they're saying they can't make it cost effective for what they're doing, but that's where the rub comes in. And if you look at I think it's a direct dig at what GM's done, because GM has said we're going big and flashy and doing all the huge batteries with huge costs. But also you look at what they've done, and I think Ford is doing that. I pulled up those numbers, and in last year per quarter, they sold, roughly $139,000 gas powered Silverados in Q1, 142,000 in Q2, 130,000 in Q3, and 142,000 in Q4. For the Silverado EV, which it launched early last year, but even in Q3 and 4 was 1995 and 1898 units.
Yeah,
they sold 2,000 units a quarter.
They don't move.
But the problem is that their intro at that space was $105,000 RST model, and my local lot here in East Tennessee has 2 on the lot, but they're the $95,000 now reduced priced RSTs. But that's where, when the Ford Lightning came out, the Pro sold out day one, because that's the largest use case in demand, because it was a $39,000 EV truck.
Yep, but wasn't even available when I went to order it.
Yeah, and it wasn't available when I went to order it. And now that same truck is $50,000 for nothing. And so they went up $20,000 because they had to, for cost wise. But if they could have figured out a way to make the Pro for $39,000, I think that would have sold in much more quantity all day, because the average buyer in the nation is not buying, $100,000 vehicles. It just doesn't exist. The average sales price, I'd say, for a vehicle is going to be in the 30s. And so you have to, like the Tesla's done so well, because it's in the 30s, you know, and that's where that sweet spot is. And so how do you, as a big OEM, I think Ford is saying for the larger trucks, it's going to have to be this hybrid because that's the only way that we're going to get that, you know, a dollar figure that makes sense for the consumer. But we can maybe do a full electric on the smaller. The question becomes with their battery manufacturing in Kentucky and stuff like that, can they get battery costs down to potentially help the cost of that vehicle? Because the issue that we face is this, you know, this ongoing price issue where, you know, nobody can buy $100,000 trucks, but, you know, Cadillac's like, look at our Escalade, but the cheapest price is $140,000, where you can buy a gas powered Escalade that has a lot of the features for under $100,000. And so, you know, what's the math there that you can't expect to sell $100,000 quarterly $100,000 trucks. It just doesn't exist.
Also think right now, what is the car market? What is hurting all the cars in the car market, new cars? It's going to be your rate for the purchase. When I got my truck, I was at a 3 point. I didn't have any special deals. I think I was like a 3.8, 3.7 interest rate. Now you're probably what, sevens? You know, so there's a huge increase there, and that's putting a lot of weight on all vehicles. All new cars are down. I think that if our economy was in a better situation right now, these higher valued vehicles would be also considered. But you're right. The term I saw or heard out of that's the most disturbing is unresolvable.
Unresolvable.
Key word there. And if they can't make money with it, it doesn't matter. They're not going to continue with the solution. The term there is it's unresolvable for Ford. You know, you mentioned Cybertruck sales down, but they're still projecting what, 30 to 100,000 this year, maybe. Now that's when you're talking about 600,000-700,000 vehicles that are F-150s. You know, I would be shocked if sales, I think what was last year, maybe 35,000 for Ford. I don't know the exact number.
Yeah, in that ballpark.
So
33. I think it was 33,310 or something.
That is such a low number.
Cybertruck was 35.
But if you're losing 30 grand a truck, then, and it's not for a production facility that will come online, you know, we know the batteries have been an issue trying to produce those batteries. I do feel like a plug-in hybrid type system or a gas electric, kind of like the old diesel locomotive type system that Scout's using. I think that is a good step, and you can use less batteries. So now your battery plant, but I think it really comes down to who is going to have that next battery technology at a rate that is low. And I still believe that the pause in the Navy that we're talking about right now is going to affect it, because if you don't think you're going to make it to that next city, you're not going to have an electric vehicle, because it's going to concern you. What if I'm out somewhere and I get stuck? Or what if I'm on a mountain and I can't get charged? So I would like to see that, you know, refocused and put through. But I'm concerned that this is probably the end of the F-150 Lightning the way we know it, because today's announcement or yesterday's announcement is a less vehicle than what I purchased 2.5 years ago.
For sure. Yeah. Stay tuned
year
for that.
Over year, it's continued. Year over year, it's continued to get worse.
Yes.
It's not like there's been an up and then a down. It's just every year they're trying to cut things to make it more affordable. And, you know, I was reluctant to spend as much as I did on my truck at the time. And it, you know, had all the features, but, you know, subsequent to that, you're seeing this, you know, the cutting of features, which we'll talk about after we finish the earnings call clips. But the other thing to note is Toyota has had tremendous success on the hybrid model, and they've done very, very well with that. And so I think Ford might be looking at that as well, saying, you know, that space between, you know, whether it's considered hybrid or that, you know, electric, you know, powered by gas, you know, model REV or whatever. That's where those type of models, you know, I think are more appealing to the average consumer. But, you know, it does come, we've talked about this before. It comes with a lot of other headaches when it comes to maintenance, and you start bringing a lot more moving parts in, and it makes the operational efficiency of EVs disappears with that, because you have an engine and a battery in that situation. But, you know, maybe some of the smaller generators will be easy to maintain.
Yeah, that segues perfectly into the next clip, which is him talking about EREV and why it makes sense. He says that because you don't have a separate drivetrain and transmission, and it is a cheaper, you know, motor or engine, I guess, to put in. Let's hear Jim talk about the EREV and kind of where that makes sense.
and the satisfaction is even higher because they're more affordable for people. The batteries is so much smaller with 150-mile range versus these huge batteries and 3-row crossovers for 300 and 350-mile range. You're talking about tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars. So for the customer, you're able to buy an electric vehicle that's fully, comparable to an ICE vehicle in terms of cost. And because there's no transmission, there's no gears, there's no driveline, there's no axles, duplicate axles, there's no duplicate powertrain, the incremental investment of fitting that combustion engine in there is very minimal for the customer. So I think at the consumer level, Americans love their big cars. They love their big trucks. That's what we do. We drive these big vehicles. But some people would love to feel that instant acceleration. They love to be able to drive by a gas station all the time. They love the feeling of electric, but they just can't get it. It's $30,000, $40,000 too expensive for these big vehicles. So this technology gives them the electric experience without the range anxiety. Now, it's not perfect. If you tow, it's not a good technology. The batteries have to be too big. So it's not a panacea. But I think how we look at it is, given we're number 3 in hybrids, the Pro Power on Board thing really surprised us. People love hybrids for more than just fuel economy. And I think we see this in more degrees of, hybrid and PHEVs as a solution for customers, EREV for certain kinds of vehicles, heavy vehicles that don't tow, and then pure EV for commercial or very affordable.
So that's kind of there's a huge pivot, right? Just strategically, that is a big change from what was being talked about 2 years ago.
And panacea for today's word. Today's word of the day is panacea. There you go.
Isn't that what you get when you're sick and you go to the hospital? They give you a shot of panacea? No.
Yeah.
No, I thought that's when you're cooking and you have to look at what you're cooking. You're seeing your pan, which is a panacea. Or it's a TV. I bought a brand new panacea. Never mind. We can keep going.
No, you tried. No, I mean, I think that you look at, like we were talking about, the narrative has been, we're promoting this new EV train, and they went through and they were talking about the investments into Blue Oval and how that was going to be the EV space. But, it looks like there's, because of I think the lack of enthusiasm for the Lightning with the price targets that it has. And I think the generic market overview, it's causing them to make a shift. But this also, the question becomes, I think we had this conversation, was it with Josh West maybe? But just the traditional OEM model and how I think they're struggling to adapt, to that new technology where Tesla's done it very well. Rivian's doing pretty decently with it. But, companies like BYD are so far ahead that these other companies are trying to catch up, but it's such a cost-intensive thing to do. How do you get to that point where you can do economy of scale and make it make sense? And so I think that, the big OEMs are at risk, even with all the investing that they've done, into the Southeast and, around the area. They're at risk, falling behind these technologies, which could come in and provide very meaningful risk. If BYD was allowed to come into the United States freely without any tariffs or restrictions, it would be the end. It would be the murder of all traditional OEMs, because I don't think people are gigantically opposed to EVs. They're opposed to the current EV costs, which is the OEM's fault. China can do it very inexpensively for a lot of different reasons, but if they were able to bring in their vehicles and bring in that $20,000 EV, it would sell like hotcakes, and you'd see them all over the roadways. It's just the traditional OEMs have their structures, and they don't have the infrastructure in place to be able to put those things in place. But also you look at some of the restrictions that we've had for mining for own batteries and stuff that China can do. That's where, the question becomes, how do we adapt and either become a leader in that or, fall by the wayside when it comes to the ability to produce a cost-effective EV? Because one of the things that Jim said in that was the batteries for this are tens and tens and tens of thousands, what he said. And, the problem is if that battery pack can go in half cost, the vehicle goes in half cost because the vehicle is a battery and 2 motors. It's not a bunch of other moving parts. And so the question is all down to battery technology. How can you get that for the cheapest cost for the best size battery that's capable? That's the way to drive prices down. But right now, I think there's a battery supply issue as far as cost, and that ineffectiveness is causing the EV market to struggle in the United States.
And I liked hearing them at least mention 150-mile range, something that, because if you've got to have some type of hybrid situation, series hybrid or otherwise, I like the idea that it still has a big enough battery. Maybe that's 50 kilowatt hours, 40 kilowatt hours. It's not the 5s and the 10s or whatever it is that's out there a lot now, where you're not going very far, and it's at least enough, more than enough for the average driver out there. And then you've got the backup if you need to go, which, most drivers just don't. And it just gives them that. So look, if that helps, it helps. I'll never do it. Again, it breaks my heart that that's the direction the pivot's going. But I get it. We'll talk about, as we transition into the 2025s and how they are kind of pulling back on kind of what you get for the dollar. We'll talk about those reasons, but I think the last pivot point, I think, will be on the driver assistance, self-driving aspect. I wanted to share that clip. Pivot. It's the last of the 2-minute clips that are going. But here, there was a question on the call about, where are we at with full self-driving and Blue Cruise and Tesla, for those that don't know, in June is going to announce, or that was already announced, but they're going to go in Austin and have full self-driving robo-taxi type going around Austin. And then by the end of the year, somewhere out here in California. And then depending on regulations, it could explode from there if it goes well. So, hey, where's Ford at on that? Are they going to develop something in-house? Are they going to license something? So again, I think this was an interesting aspect to the call that I want you guys to hear.
I think we're at that point where we have to decide. Look, level 3 is around the corner. Blue Cruise is now over 300 million miles. Customers are still paying for it. We did drop the price, by the way, so it is getting commoditized to some extent, but it is still a great opportunity. But the capability in the company is growing. All those Argo people that came with Ford, they are developing a really nice level 2, level 3 system that we think will be among the best in its execution. We may not be the first. We may not grab all the headlines, but look at Blue Cruise. Blue Cruise is continuing to win all the consumer awards for the best operating system on level 2. Level 2 plus is around the corner. Level 3, we think, is a huge unlock on highway miles. Eyes off. I think we're in good shape with our internal capabilities, but look, we're not so Pollyannish about our own capability that we're not going to look at other people's system or not believe that level 4 personal autonomy is going to be interesting at some point. They're making a lot of progress over there in level 4. And it is time for us, not just in the US, but globally, to start looking at, and that's why we made some of the announcements we did today, because we need a strong strategy team to decide, do we partner? Do we continue to ride our own team into this level 4 personal autonomy? And I think you're going to find, just like our move on Argo, we'll be thoughtful and practical. We won't get in love with the size of the market. We'll make a practical decision. And I think we'll be well positioned. I'm very confident in Sammy and Doug and their technical prowess. They know the FSD system. They know what's out there. They know the Waymo system as it gets democratized for level 4, individual level 4. And so I think we'll make a good decision. But I think, Adam, we're a lot closer to that partnering decision at Ford.
So just for the benefit of the audience that may not know some of these things, level 3 is like, level 2 is what we know today as Blue Cruise or Super Cruise from Chevy. You could have hands off the wheel, but you're still paying attention, eyes forward. Level 3 is eyes off. They can let you kind of look around and they're not going to beep at you all the time. Level 4 is what you are trying to see with FSD and Waymo, where you're just completely disengaged from the experience and it does its thing. Waymo does it in a different way. They actually just released in the last couple of days an article that said 70% of all Waymo rides had some type of human observation and interaction in the background by the Waymo team. So even that, I think, is where FSD has, the potential of being so much more. It's not geo-fenced, all that type of thing. And then you heard a couple of references to Argo. And for those that don't know, back in 2017, Ford bought a company that does AI and self-driving for $1 billion, spent $1 billion on it. And then 2019, they started a partnership with Volkswagen. They jumped in $2.6 billion from Volkswagen for that same thing. By 2022, they had identified, look, this isn't ready for prime time yet. This isn't that type of full self-driving can't be, almost what they said today, right? Is can't be commercialized. The cost of it is too much. We're not there yet with technology. And they pivoted, another pivot.
Pivot.
There it is. They pivoted into moving those people into Blue Cruise. And so that's where the Blue Cruise team came from, is a lot of them came from that Argo project that for so many years just didn't get any traction. And so now the question is, how far can they go? They think that team can go far enough with Blue Cruise to get it to level 3, which is eyes off on the road, but can it get to level 4? I think not. I think, like he said, they're closer to a partnership than they are to keeping that in-house. Like, is that what you heard?
I mean, the question becomes, though, does it make sense? I mean, this is a monetary question for the companies, but does it make sense to spend all the time trying to research such an advanced technology that would have to communicate with other fully autonomous systems? If Tesla comes out with a fully autonomous level 4 system and Ford does, then the two systems have to communicate. So the question becomes, would not a joint goal of a single system to that scale make sense, where, right now we have Super Cruise and Blue Cruise and Tesla and all these different autonomous driving technologies, and there's a lot of technology that's required to get to a full level 4 across the nation. Something that, you have to have a lot of different, compute that is more localized. You have to have a lot of different things that go into motion to keep those systems safe and efficient. But the issue that comes out is, we're at the cusp of all of this technology. Tesla's obviously further ahead. They don't have it all figured out, but how do you bring that into alliance with everybody to get everybody to that space? And I'm sure all the companies are going to want to claim it for themselves, but if you don't, then all those systems have to communicate, which I think would create more error than having a unified full self-driving system.
This is where you have, again, Josh and I have been working on this for a while. And since I got out of the data center industry and got into the charging, one of the aspects he and I have been working on is utilizing our sites for V2V programs. That's vehicle to vehicle. And there's a lot of different things with that. You have V2V, vehicle to vehicle, V2X, which is vehicle to everything, V2G, that's vehicle to grid. That'll let you put your battery from your house through your charging system and actually sell that power to the power grid when it's at a high cost, so you can make money on what's called peak shaving at that time. You have VPPs, virtual power plants. All of this is something that Josh and I have been talking about. But what I think everybody needs to understand here is, whether it's Waymo, whether it is the systems that everybody else is trying to use that they've worked on since 2019 or 18 or 15, they're two totally different technologies. And I think that is why you have a multi-trillion-dollar company in Tesla. It's not because they make the best vehicles. It's not because they have the fastest vehicles, although they do one of the fastest. It's because it is a technology company, and their system for self-driving is not just light years ahead of everybody else. It is beyond where they can reach, probably dumping $1 billion each into that system, because they're using an analog system that, like you said, Josh, they're going to have to communicate. Whereas Tesla is going to have the ability to have a AI that can drive better than I can. And I think I drive good. Josh will disagree, especially since I trip through Florida. But
your tires might disagree.
My tires might disagree, although, well, we won't get into the details of that. We're good. But
I only let him drive it because there's a junkie. It was
You
a
know?
junky Mercedes, and the engine kept slipping, so he couldn't actually rev it, and so it
Oh, I
helped
was
us
mad.
out to where he couldn't really,
I was
he
mad.
couldn't injure me, so that was beneficial. But him and an EV on an interstate is a terrifying thing. Keep going, Jesse.
But that's the problem here with everybody else. They're playing catch up, and Elon's playing a different game than everybody else. You know, they're trying to get into this. You know, I've got LiDAR cameras. I have this system for, you know, spacing. You're having multiple devices that can fail, whereas Tesla has that one ability to integrate. And I think that ability to have that integration and have it drive the car through full self-driving is why he will be able to produce a car that can do taxiing. He can produce that little van that can take people around a city with no driver. And that is some of the technology that Josh and I today, actually, I sent a letter out to one of our partners trying to get that type of technology for either Tennessee or at least a project we have in East Tennessee on a large resort mountain that's going to be built. So I 100% am concerned that everybody else's self-driving is not even going to come close to Tesla, which again, to your point, Chris, does that mean maybe Ford would say, we know this, so we're going to do what they're doing and lease or license that technology, and we're going to take $5 and we're going to make sure our Ford is on the full self-driving system of Tesla, and each month you pay $20 for that if you want it, and then 5 goes to Ford, 15 goes to Tesla in that situation. Well, that's a better investment in my eyes, but I have no clue.
Yeah, and they talked. It's interesting on the Tesla earnings call. They all these are hints. You got to put pieces together. Nothing's been announced. I don't know that it will be for another year or so. But on the Tesla call, somebody asked, "Are you in any talks to license FSD?" And Elon said, "Yeah, we are. We have had talks with some OEMs about licensing FSD." And then here comes the Ford call. Are those things coincidental? Are they related? Are we going to hear another great collaboration between Ford and Tesla? I mean, if you're going to do it, I'd love to see it. In the United States, Jesse, you're certainly right. Like, nobody is even close to what Tesla is doing with FSD. But, you know, as we saw from Out of Spec and Kyle and those guys out in China, China's right there. In fact, better than Tesla in the Chinese market, because this is where regulation and all this, it gets really complicated, because Tesla is not allowed to get the data and to try out FSD in China. There's a bunch of different reasons and restrictions in terms of where the data is housed, what servers they're on, national security issues. So for a number of reasons, they only have autopilot in China for Tesla and not FSD at all. So they have no data to learn things like the different driving styles and the street signs. And even though they're not mapped and geofenced the way that Waymo is, they still need that base of data to collect and from driver information, and they don't have it in China. And the Chinese, the couple different companies, one is doing just camera like Tesla, one is doing a combination of camera and LiDAR, one is doing just LiDAR, and from everything that, you know, Out of Spec and Kyle are talking about, they're every bit as good, if not better, than what Tesla's doing. But he also talked about how the Chinese driver is more aggressive, and so it's tailored to that market. The AI is tailored to the driving style of China.
They have more dispensable people, anyways.
They're saying they're more aggressive. They're like, hey, the Chinese driver is just going to go. Like, they ignore everybody around them. If you were to slow down to let somebody in front of you, the Chinese driver would be like, what the heck are you doing? It's almost like when we get onto an on-ramp and somebody slows down on an on-ramp, you're yelling at them. You're like, what are you doing? It's an on-ramp. Get going. In China, if you have politeness as you drive in China, it actually is unsafe, because people aren't they're anticipating you not to move. They are being aggressive in whatever way they need to. Well, and their cars there reflect that in terms of their AI.
I'd say the difference there is, if China wants that city to be autonomous, they would make it autonomous tomorrow if that's what they want, and no one can say anything about it.
Yeah.
And you do have some giants there. Huawei is a giant in that field.
Huawei was the one I was thinking of.
You know, I mean, you now, I don't believe BYD's systems are Huawei used, but I think a lot of the people doing the autonomous came from Huawei. So I think that they have the ability. But again, I'm looking at what do we have in the United States that could be in the next 2 years. And the only system I see that could be out there in 2 years is Tesla's system. And it might still take some geofencing within a city. It might still take a lot of learning, but this is why Josh and I have been trying to design an edge-based co-location data
and he
center.
shows that he's still great. So I think, yes.
Oh, sorry. My phone went crazy there.
What?
Yeah, I think
Like,
that
oh.
there's a likelihood, and we've talked about this multiple times, but in our very first episode, we had said CCS was ending and that NACS from Tesla would be licensed across all and become the new standard. And flash forward 2 years, that has pretty much taken place. It's not rolled out fully in these vehicles as far as dropping it, but the network's opened up and NACS will be rolled out in these future models. I have a strong suspicion, and we'll mark this as the first time I say it. I have a strong suspicion in 2 years there's going to be some sort of a licensing, maybe just for the full self-driving piece. But if consumers choose to opt into it, it'll be an inputted software with some technology upgrades to the vehicles that will be linked to a Tesla-based software. They have more money and more technology as far as into that space. And, Tesla's already looking at the full self-driving taxi, as they announced last year. And obviously the robots and all that have a lot of progression to go. And yet they are already to that space where they're designing the vehicle to not have a driver and to let the vehicle drive on its own because of that technology. So I have a strong suspicion that companies like Ford and otherwise, rather than do an investment of, like Jesse was saying, multiple billions to try to come out with a technology that might be to par, that they will work to, especially with the history of what's taken place with NACS and the relationship with some of these OEMs. You'll see a similar rollout where Tesla's full self-driving system would be created as a universal standard, which further, I guess, promotes Elon's companies. But I mean, he seems to have caught the niche on a few of those things.
And that's the money. I mean, we're talking about the value of vehicles and how Ford can sell vehicles, and they're a $45-50 billion company. Once you add that data source and that data ability to the company, now all of a sudden you're 10 times its value, because that data is so valuable, not only to people driving around, but you're also going to know what billboards you passed. Not only what billboards you passed, you're going to know how long they were in front of this location or that location. It's going to change the ability for somebody to say how many cars go in front of this building. It's going to dictate how valuable that building is with that data. So you can monetize that data in so many ways that can improve, even fire and rescue. Now you can divert people because you know where they're at. You can even look live and see what it is if they have to opt into it. There are so many applications that could be drugged from this, which is again why Tesla is $1 trillion company and Ford and Chevy and all these others are $500 million or 50 billion or 70 billion or whatever it is.
Something interesting, just as a tie into that thought, is we were had the privilege of while we were on our trip in Florida, we got to see a little bit of what the Florida Department of Transportation does for reporting of accidents, and got to see one of their operating centers. And it was a fascinating thing to look at, and kind of how some of that plays into the region. But to see, I had no idea how much attention that the states have on the roadways. You always see responses, but you don't realize the back end network of what happens to that. But they have the updating to the mapping systems when there's a wreck. And they were saying that they already have some of the technology that they were working on in place that would help with getting fire trucks, in a direction that would get them from point A to point B in a clear way, or divert drivers. But that type of technology mixed in with full self-drive, I think, comes up with this beautiful combination of a better driving experience to the consumer. And so that's something that, those technologies will have to continue to evolve, but it's going to take the work of, I think, many to get to that same space. And we've seen the same type of thing take place in, advanced air mobility. They're trying to figure out how do you take the technologies to get these aircraft in the sky, but it's the autonomous, like the drones for pizza deliveries and stuff like that. I've had such a hard time because they have to deal with the systems of how these communicate with the network. And if I'm delivering a pizza out of sight, how do you know that drone's not going to run into an airplane or another device based on its trajectory? So there's so much data and communications that have to take place for some of these newer technologies to take place, that you see the ideas of them being presented, like package drone deliveries and autonomous driving with the cyber taxi and some of the robo-run. But those type of things, require so much technology that it's not as simple as a vehicle being able to just do something. It requires this AI brain or these other technologies to communicate across the board the grand scheme of that technology.
Which only one company has right now.
Yeah.
So let's pivot on our own and kind of on the backside of this, talk
Pivot.
about
Kill 'em, mate.
Let's talk about what the software team is doing that is good, and then we'll jump into the clips about why the 2025 truck is going to be different than what we had in the 2022s and 23s. So let's at least start with some positive news, right? Let's get some positivity into the mix before we pivot once again.
It's about dang time. Right,
yeah. So one of the changes in 2025 is that when you're charging at a DC charger, the adapter will lock in, and you will have to press the unlock button and have either your phone as key in close proximity or your key fob. And so this is a needed improvement. I've talked before about when I was on my road trip, I didn't want to use my favorite A to Z adapter because I was worried that when I went to lunch, someone would steal it. So I used my the one I didn't care as much about. So like, if somebody steals it, it'll tell me, hey, your truck stopped charging. I'll go out there. They'll have my lesser adapter that I'm not as attached to. And but yeah, there's times when you have to stand next to your truck or you're paranoid that someone's going to steal your adapter. And this should have been there. I mean, this is, hey, great job, but it should have been there. And then of course we've talked about there's so many things that changed for 2024 that we still haven't seen on the 22s and 23s. So how long will this take to get to the rest of us? Who knows? Maybe 2027.
But my question is, has there been any indication of when they're actually going to put NACS in the vehicle?
No, I don't think they are. I think again, this is that you've done your, because keep in mind, they were planning to sell 100,000 of these trucks a year. So they've made these supplier contracts. I think this is why in 2024, they were like, hey, Ford Power promise, if you buy one of these, we're going to install a charger for you, because they've committed to so many of these chargers. They probably got so many of these 80 amp chargers in inventory. They're not making these new because the trucks don't even do 80 amps anymore. There'd be no reason to build 80 amp chargers. The reason they're giving them away is because they've got an inventory of 80 amp. Let me just also preface by saying I don't know this for a fact. Nobody has told me anything. I'm just completely speculating that if you're giving away $1,000 80 amp chargers and $2,000 power installs, it's because you're sitting on inventory. And I would suspect when it comes to these CCS connectors and the wire harnesses associated with them and the contracts and all of these things, that there's no reason to re-engineer and spend any money. Like what we're about to hear with 2025 is they're not spending money adding features and harnesses.
Well, from what I've heard, Chris, you've used about half of their supply of PCS with harnesses, have you not?
Yeah. Well, those are the low voltage DC harnesses in my defense.
You're burning through their whole supply just with your truck. So
yeah, I'm doing my part to get us closer to NACS. But yeah, they haven't announced anything, but it's hard to imagine. It's definitely not for 25. So why would you roll out a 26 NACS for a year just to pivot into 27 with your new stuff? I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but I can't see it, to be honest with you. I think this is what it's going to be. Why would you spend any engineering effort doing anything else? Why would you get suppliers and manufacturers? I think they've got an inventory of this stuff already, or they have contractual agreements already in place that they need to sell these things. So yeah, at least they've added this though. That's a plus. I think the next thing on the software side is these are just little incremental changes that are kind of cool, right? Like, so we saw in 2024, they added the charging speed to the driver display. So now you can see that. And again, little bitterness. I have not seen it for 22 or 23. So come on, Ford, push that stuff to us. So here's another thing that is cool to see that we also don't have and might not get for a couple of years, but it's still cool to see, which is it shows your charging speed now on the truck charge settings display. And you can see here now there's two different sliders. There's a slider for your daily and a trip. So if my daily is 80%, 90%, that's my daily setting. But then I know I'm going on a trip the next day. I don't have to go in and get the slider. I can just click on trip. And in this case, it's 100% charge. that this person is fast charging. Like, hey, I'm on a road trip. I will also say, guys, don't fast charge to 100%. Just doesn't make sense. But for this imperfect example, they have decided to use DC fast charging at 100%. But yeah, you can now.
I will brag on one thing about our charging solution. One of our 2 companies that we're using, Kimpower, you can actually click on the display while you're charging, and it gives the entire analytics of what you're doing. Not only like this, but it also shows what your truck is taking in. It shows the temperature of the prongs that you have there. It shows if there is a slowdown, why that slowdown is. Is it the charger? Is it the demand? Or is it the truck not accepting it? So I was charging. I took a trip up there not too long ago, I guess last week, and I stopped at a DC or Electrify America, and I was getting 150, 145, 150. And then when I got into North Carolina, I was only getting about 135 to 140 on their system. So I looked just to see, and it was my truck. It was a temperature-based system. So it was the temperature that was regulating it on, and it was stopping because my truck wasn't taking it in. So having that data is very useful, and I'm glad they're adding it here. But that's one thing that I'm really happy about with Kimpower is I have all that data if you want to get out of the truck and look at it.
Yeah, I wish that was part of it. I did a market survey recently for a company, and that was one of my feedback is that, look, 95% of drivers will never need, want, or care about these details. But for the 5% of us that do, there should be a screen in there that lets us see this stuff. And so I love that Kimpower, and I think Alpatronic also does some of that charge curve data. And I think it should all be in the truck, but at least this is a step in the right direction.
It at least needs to show that the charging speed is your vehicle's fault and not the charger's fault. Because a lot of times I'm like, is this my fault that I'm getting 120, or is this the charger's fault? Because you don't know how those variables play in. But if you're showing that the charger's capable of delivering more, but the vehicle's requesting less, then that's a vehicle problem and not your problem.
And just to be clear, this doesn't show that. This is only going to show what's actively happening. But what would be nice if that other data
which
was
is
there.
a plus, because I was always looking on the apps and other things to try to figure out what speed was being delivered. So it's a plus to now have that within the system. It would make sense to have that in the system.
Yep. And then on the AC side, they've added the amps. Again, I wish the amps was on the DC side as well, because to your point, Jesse, you can tell, with the Ford battery pack having a low relative voltage, the amps matter. So, if you're in that 10-minute boost phase, you're getting, high 4s, almost 500 amps, getting your maximum charge curve. And then that amp draw pulls back a bit down the road. And some of these EAs, like, the 150s and some of the Ford ones that are 180s that are at the dealerships, they don't give anywhere close to 400 or 500 amps. They're like 300 amp units. And so if you can see the amp of the DC charger, why your kilowatts on the DC side aren't maybe as aggressive as the charge curve should be. But at least on the AC side here, you can see it's going to show you 48 amps, 9.6 kilowatts. It's going to show you what it's actually doing there. So just added detail. I'm always in favor of added detail. And then this is something that, again, is super obscure. Not a lot of people are going to use it, but I really like it for a couple reasons. The AC charge rate. So currently the truck is going to currently pull whatever it is that charger will supply, and all the way up to 48 amps or 80 amps if you have the older 22s and 23s that still had the full 80 amp chargers on board. But I like being able to adjust it at the truck level, because some of these chargers have dip switches that you've got to open all the time. They're a pain in the butt to adjust. Even the Tesla wall connector is not easy to adjust the amperage on. You've got to go in and sync it via Bluetooth, and it's a whole pain in the butt to do. So I like this because I know for a couple different reasons. One, when I very first got the truck, I didn't have a charger yet. So I was going to use my mobile charger, and my plan was to use it off the dryer plug. And this is when I was still not fully understanding like the plugs and the power, and 30 amp plug, 30 amp charger, let's go. And then, oh crap, you're only supposed to charge at 24, but I can't adjust the mobile connector to 24, and I can't adjust it in the truck. And so it created a sense of urgency where I was looking at 24 amp Amazon chargers and adapters and trying to get an electrician, and maybe didn't have the time to go and get 3 bids. I was in a rush to now get a NEMA 1450 connector that would work. And this kind of buys you time if you're in that scenario. I think scenario number 2 is when I'm running off solar, and I've got a power grid outage. I'm not going to be pulling 48 amps. My solar panels, though, very much can create 4, 5, 6 6 kilowatts of power. And my house may be only using 1 kilowatt of those. If I don't have a grid or a battery to send it to, I want it to send it to the truck. So I can go into the truck and crank it all the way down to whatever amperage my solar can provide at the time, and still get the 240 volts at a very low amps and get the efficiency. Because one of the things that I think a lot of people don't know, and I pulled this information, if you're charging off 110, because that's another solution, you just plug it into a 110 and you're going to get a kilowatt and a half out of it, but you're losing 18 to 25% at 120 volt power. That's huge losses of just waste. And then even if you then go to 240, it's actually more efficient if you lower your amperage. So for those of you guys out there using 80 amps of power on your Lightning, you're losing 12 to 15% of your electrical rates. You're paying for the electricity. It's essentially like gassing up your car, but 12 or 15% of the gas overflows all over the side of the car. You're doing that with your electricity, and you can see the lower your amperage, the more efficient it will be. If you have the time to charge at 24 amps, you're only going to lose 8 to 10%. You're going to get more and pay less if you can lower that rate. And some days maybe you can. So I can go in that day and say, hey, I got 12 hours to charge, no big deal. And I can lower it to 24 amps, even 16 amps if I wanted to. And I have the time to do it. Maybe it's just going to sit there on a Saturday and I'm not going anywhere that morning. Other times, maybe I need the full 80. Other times, maybe the 32. And so having this ability in there to adjust it dynamically to any amperage at any time, quick and easy, I think there's a use case there. It's a small one, but I like it. So I was excited to see that. I think that kind of now lets us pivot into the cost cutting. Pivot. Yeah. So pivot. Cost cutting side, right? So let's listen to what the other person on the call was the CFO, the new CFO of Ford. And so she was talking about cost reductions, and then we'll get another kind of clips on that, and then we'll go into what the changes are for 2025 that we're seeing.
The Model E team, where I've been spending a lot of my time, did a tremendous job delivering $1.4 billion in cost reductions last year, net of a $100 million increase in spend to launch our new battery plants in next-gen EVs. This cost performance was particularly important given industry pricing pressure, which resulted in year-over-year reductions in revenue and wholesales of 35% and 9% respectively. Model E remains focused on continuous improvements in gross margins and disciplined capital allocation that will drive profitable growth in the future.
So I think there, they're talking about, look, the pricing pressure, you saw all those sales, right? You saw all the cost cutting, you saw all the 0% interest, you saw all the lease deals. And the reason they sold so many in Q4 for Mach-E and for Lightning is because they had all those dealer incentives and all those factory discounts, cash on the hood, right? You saw all over the boards, you saw all these great deals. Is this a great deal? Is this a great deal? I'm getting a Lariat for $55,000, right? And so even with those pricing pressures, good news, they controlled costs and the cost didn't go up. So somehow they reduced the cost, or they reduced the price of all their trucks, got a lot of volume, got a lot of sales, and the profitability didn't get worse. Didn't get better, but didn't get worse. So all of the profit things that they made for 2024, all the cost cutting in 2024, resulted in no more losses. It was off balance by them having to lower the price. And this is where Jim was saying, what was the word, Jesse, when Jim called it unresolvable? Was that the term? Yeah, unresolvable. And so I think they realized this, right? Look, we just went and did a bunch of cost cutting for 2024, and we're still not making money because then we had the market pressure required us to lower the price. Consumers are not willing to pay more for this. This is the price point if we want to move them. And the cost savings are just not there. It's unresolvable. So is Gen 1 making a profit? Let's hear what they have to say.
We're making improvements so that the Gen 1 products are still not profitable. What's really interesting about this, though, is that we're able to hold flat while you're increasing the volume significantly. The other thing that's going in there is the $1 billion of additional costs that are related to our Bosch battery factory, as well as related to our Gen 2 products. So that $1 billion is about It's about half engineering and about half in the Bossk area.
So yeah, that's them basically talking about we held flat on cost, even though we had to lower our price. And when we say we lost $1 billion in Model E, half of that is the engineering, all those engineers we talked about, and half of that is the battery in Blue Oval. So, and we've talked about this before. When they say they're losing, before it used to be 100,000 per vehicle, now it's 30,000 per vehicle. A lot of that, the billions of dollars, that includes the billions of dollars for these engineers that are out here in Palo Alto, in Irvine, in Detroit, the construction of the battery plants in Michigan, in Kentucky, the construction of Blue Oval in Tennessee, that is baked into that number. So I think that's what we're hearing them talk about there. They're going to continue to make cuts, right? They're continue to streamline how they can make these trucks profitable, because really they can't. So it's how do we minimize the damage for the next couple of years on how much money we lose. Ford Pro is going to make money. Blue is going to make money on the gas side. We need to sell EVs because we talked about on a previous call that Ford said for every EV they sell, they can sell 17 profitable gas vehicles. So otherwise they're buying credits from Tesla. So they're going to keep making these things. You still got to sell 30 to 40,000 of them to offset the 600,000 F-150s. So that's going to continue to happen. How do we lose as little money as possible doing it? And that's where you're starting to see that in 24, they made some changes. And here we are in 25. They are making some changes as well. If this is hard to read on people's screen, especially if you're looking at this on a phone, we'll include a link to this in the description of the video. And so you guys can kind of see what it is we're seeing here on the screen. But this is basically an update that goes through the models available are once again going to be Pro, XLT, Flash, Lariat, and Platinum. Mechanically, nothing has changed. Nothing has been deleted. On the exterior, they've got a new 18-inch gloss black wheel that's standard on the Pro and XLT. So that'll be a different wheel package than before. Some splash guards are going to be different. The tire inflator and sealant kit is now standard. The spare tire is now an option. So there's not going to be an included spare tire. You're going to have to pay for that. The carbon fixed extended running board is a standalone option for fleets and Pro, or for fleets on Pro. One of the things that was deleted was the bed storage box. I don't recall what the heck that was, to be honest with you. No new colors. They're going to delete the avalanche color. Interior, they're going to start using Active X trim on the Flash instead of the cloth. And they deleted the interior fold-out work surface on the XLT and on the Flash. So that is interesting, especially for the Flash. The fact that you're not going to have that fold-out work surface anymore on the XLT or Flash. That's one of those cost-cutting areas, right? Things that have changed is that now you're going to, if you buy the mobile charger, you're going to get the DC fast charging adapter, which is now a Ford branded Electron version. And then Sirius XM, which I don't really care about, maybe people do. It's now going to be standard on Pro instead of XLT. I guess that would be an addition, right? It didn't used to be on Pro and now it's available. So yeah, that is one of the things on the outside safety security. The secure code wireless keyless entry on the driver's side is now optional on Pro, XLT, and Flash. That used to be standard. I know I've got it on mine, although in fairness, I don't use it, but I hear a lot of tradespeople do, and hear a lot of people talk about that keypad outside. So it's now a dealer installed option if you want it on Pro, XLT, and Flash. So these little things, right? Getting rid of the spare tire, getting rid of the fold out work surface. Those are all kind of aspects that are changing. On the tow package, the e-locker, the locking differential, which used to be standard, is now only available on the tow package, the max tow package. So if you want the locking differential, you have to upgrade to the tow package. And then on deleted side, the smart hitch, which was very popular. The smart hitch and the onboard scales. The onboard scales have come and gone a couple different times. So now I think they've just gotten rid of it altogether. So no smart hitch, no onboard scales on the tow package anymore. Those have been removed. So you start seeing these little incremental changes to control cost. And then as we get into, there's a whole list here of the standard equipment that's on Pro. I'm not going to go through all of that. You guys can check the link out in the description and kind of go through that yourself and see everything that's standard on it. But I did want to pause a little bit when we get to the Flash, and I'm trying to scroll through here and get to the Flash area. That's the XLT. When we get to Flash, this is a big call out. I'm not even sure I understand it. I mean, I guess I understand it from a cost perspective, but you'll see right here at the top, 122 kilowatt hour usable capacity. And this is going to be for the Flash and the Fleet Pro extended range. So used to be that you would get 130, was it 132, Jesse?
It was exactly 10 kilowatts larger. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just interesting. Like, why would you go through the hassle of, it's not even like there's a whole module missing, right? It's not like you pulled one module to make it simple. It's a totally different module that you've got to manufacture and build, all for 10 kilowatt hours. I mean, I get it. That's cost savings, but it just seems like an interesting choice, to be sure. When range is so important, and we talk about how range is a big factor for these customers. So if you're a Flash buyer, man, you're better off with the 24, in my opinion, right? You're going to get that 10, unless this is followed up by further price cuts. And this is, we don't know. We don't know any of the pricing for these. So if the Flash is going to be a lower price, and that's reflected in the battery, and that's going to move more volume, and that's going to save on credits that you have to buy, and that's going to move more inventory and scale better, then I guess it makes sense. But if the price is going to be the exact same.
Yeah, I think what they've done is they've stripped so much of the features within the Pro and other model that they don't need the battery to produce the same range. I might be wrong, but you went from Lariat to Platinum and it lost 20 miles. And really the features added was the massage seats and a couple other little things, but it wasn't much. But the extra technology absorbed a functional 20 miles. And my guess is they've realized that they can shave, what is almost 10% of the battery size for that. And if that battery, let's say, costs 30 grand to them, that's a $3,000 of savings that they can shave off, to potentially incorporate into that. Now, I don't know the exact logistics behind it, but from what I can tell, I don't think that it's going to change the range. But I think that those vehicles have so many less features that they can keep the range estimate the same. Customers won't, as long as the range is there, customers won't question the size of the battery. And that might be the functional difference, but maybe there's some other math. But like you said, it's a totally different structure. I don't know why they're doing it like that. If you removed a whole module or whatever, you think it would be a different picture. But nonetheless, if it's a more cost-effective solution to help you push it out, then maybe that's the reason that they're taking that approach.
Yeah, I got to imagine it will in change the range. But again, I'm interested to hear kind of the details of that, I guess. I don't know. It's like I say, it's some of this stuff just broke my heart because it's going such a different direction. I pragmatically, business wise, I understand it. Just because I understand it doesn't mean I don't hate to see it. It's hard to get enthusiastic about it. And so, yeah, I think, a lot of this stuff just made me feel so much better about my purchase early on, because some of my worries was, hey, I'm buying the first version out and I'm probably overpaying for what it is. And there are a lot of great deals out there that they've had to do to incentivize these Lariats. That are certainly better deals than I got. But if you're a new buyer now with higher interest rates, well, I guess they got a lot of interest rates that are lower too through Ford. But you're getting less truck. You're getting less truck. And I guess that's just like, man, it's just, I would just think that 3 years later, we were going to have better in so many ways. And so I know they've been improving through OTAs, but man, I just thought we'd be a whole step level above what we're seeing, and that prices would be down with scale, and that, so it's a little deflating. I'm not going to lie. It's a little deflating, and it's hard to have the enthusiasm. And now it's like, I got to wait till 2027 to have it.
Yeah. My big grievance has been, with everything that they're doing, they're scaling back the truck. And so now new with less features, they're trying to drive the price down, but then it makes our 22 models, even though it has a little bit more features, go down in value even more. Like you were saying a minute ago, you can get a Lariat for $55,000. Well, that's a pickle for the people that had paid for it, 2 years ago for much higher. I have in a standard vehicle, great equity in my vehicle. But with a Lightning, I'm not even to even yet with my equity in my vehicle because of those variables. And so that's another piece of the pie to figure out is, they're driving prices down, but all the current owners are now stuck in their vehicles if they didn't pay cash for it. Because, like if I chose, hey, I want the Flash or whatever, I can't functionally do that because yes, the Flash is cheaper, but I can't even get anywhere near what I currently owe, which is almost half of what I paid for my truck when I bought it new.
Sorry, I there was one thing I left out of there. Also, Pro Power on board is no longer standard at 7.2. It's an option. So if you're getting the Flash, pay attention, right? What battery you're getting and what Pro Power are you getting? Because that's a big, huge feature to me is that the full 9.6 altogether for the truck, you're only going to get 2.4 as standard. You've got to pay for those things. So yeah, it's going to be, it's just such a game. This is why nobody likes it, right? It's going to come out at like $75,000 with all of these things that you've got to add on. You're got to try to get it below the 80,000 if the incentive still exists, which for now it does. But then you're going to have incentives from the dealer and cash back and low interest, and it's all going to end up coming out cheaper in the end. But it's going to be such a song and dance to get there. And they're going to try to throw on the security system and the special spray and the maintenance package to change your oil, even though you don't have any. And it's like, just the song and dance of it all. Just tell me the dang price. Tell me I'm not going to get these options and it's going to be $64,000. And if I want to add them on, here's what they are. But when you're messing around with a high MSRP, then you're coming up against that $80,000 max. And even if you have all the incentives, it's based on MSRP. So I can't add the things that I want, the spare tire and I got to go you got to pick and choose, and you can't, the spare tire and all that stuff you can go get later. But the Pro Power, you got to, the max tow package, you got to decide on those things. And some of these things are intertwined. Like if you want certain features, you've got to buy certain packages for the one feature you want. Everybody knows that's the game. I just don't like it. It's exhausting. I'm done. That's it. I think that's where we are. Again, I 100% understand it. We've heard the calls. We know they're not making money, but man.
So to sum it up,
pivot. Lots of pivoting on this call, but yeah, that's it. I think that's where we are. So,
right. Well, we've said everything that is what that report is. So to kind of sum everything up, why don't each of us give a example of where we think this is going to go for Ford? Because again, the term of the day for that is unresolvable, and it might just be unresolvable for Ford, but other companies might not be in that same situation. So for Ford, it sounds to me as if, okay, the big truck market for them on EVs is not going the direction they are. Obviously, the 300,000 trucks a year that the Ford plant in Tennessee was supposed to produce is down to 100, and can be a combination of a lot of different things. Still going to build it, still going to have it. But it sounds to me as if they're trying to prepare us for the T3 being a Ranger size pickup with probably 300 plus range in the Ranger. Out of that, you're probably going to have a cost point of starting in that 35 to 40, maybe if we're lucky, going up to maybe a $60,000, $70,000, well, 60
fully loaded
Ranger more than 60,000. I mean, that's high anyway. But maybe if is a $35,000 all-wheel drive Ranger that gets 320-mile range, is that something I would trade my truck for? Probably not. But it is that Rivian style, and it feels, based on your conversations today, that is the direction Ford is going. That's where I think that's going to happen.
I think on my side of things, I agree with you. I think that, based on the earnings call, their new trajectory is going to be focusing on, a Ranger style truck. I don't think you're going to see a 320 range on it. My guess is you'll be 250 to 280 because that'll be what they find to be efficient for the battery size. I think it'll be smaller range, but cost effective. I mean, if you look at the gas powered equivalent for the Raptors, the XLs are starting at 32. The Raptor Ranger is 55 starting at. And my guess is you're going to see a roughly similar scope of price, but maybe added on 5,000, roughly 5 to 10,000. So probably in the range of upwards like 39 to 60, 70 in that range, top end. It'll be a mid-size with under 300 mile ranges if I was to make an estimated guess on that. And then they are going to be probably announcing maybe as part of the T3 lineup, but the launch of a Ram Charger Scout type truck that's going to be the full size Lightning refresh. It might not be called Lightning. It might be a part of the T3 series or whatever that looks like, but it'll be a full size that is 100 miles of all electric, and then this generator connection bit. And then they probably will still keep the Lightning. I don't think they're going to discontinue the Lightning, but they're going to scale back the expectations for that to maintain 10 to 20,000 sales or whatever. And that's just going to be their luxury EV lineup, and they're going to sell less of those. And it'll keep the features and roughly of where it sits today. But that's kind of how I see that overlay taking place. But the big question for me becomes, if the federal government does some things to make it to where you can make and source batteries locally and make that more efficient, and their Kentucky battery facility can open up and produce batteries for more efficient, will they then have the ability to then start to trickle back into heavier looking into these battery solutions, or do they just want to keep that the spotlight of their vision, which is these plug-in hybrids, these EREVs, and then the smaller vehicles, which would have the more range? Because the Mach-E has done pretty well overall for sales and production, but that's because it's affordable and smaller. And so I think that they can see that doing well as a truck, but then how do they deal with that with the larger vehicles? Obviously, we saw Rivian open up their network for their e-vans to sell, and so that was another bit of news. Like, you can now go buy their Amazon delivery van set up for, I think it was like 80,000 starting price. Is that right, Chris?
Somewhere in that ballpark, yeah.
But,
And minimum is only one. Like if you go to Ford and you want to do a fleet purchase with Ford, if you want to buy the Lightning or something like that, you got to have 5, or you have to already have a fleet. If you're starting from scratch, you need to buy 5, or already have that fleet relationship. Rivian's saying just one.
But I think that something like that, is going to become a competitor for them, because the Rivian van has done well, and you're seeing partnerships like Amazon utilize them a lot. And so I think something like that's going to produce. But what they've said in these calls is that they're going to focus their larger EV initiatives on these fleet rollouts. And so what does that mean? Do they try to do a stripped down Pro and keep that model, or are they looking more at those industrial e-transit style EVs like this Rivian competitor, because they know that they can sell those for 80 to 90,000, and they can put the larger batteries in and get 250 mile range and be fine with it? Maybe that's where they're focusing, is to try to get that e-transit ramped up. But I think that their modeling for that indicates that for a vehicle, for me, in the next generation of Ford, is going to be an interesting take. I think I mentioned it last week. I mean, I really like the look of the Scout and what it's doing and where it's headed. Obviously, we don't have all the details, and it's still yet to be produced in 2 years. But that style of van with 800 volt architecture, the speed, the look, the full size truck, and 350 mile range, I'm happy with that, as long as it's not $120,000. But question becomes what that looks like when it actually releases, and they have that EREV style. So curious to see how that plays in, and if that's something worth considering.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm kind of right in alignment with you guys. I think this is going to be 2 years of doggy paddling for Ford. I think 2027 is like the circle on the calendar. You've got R2 is going to come out there in 2026, mid to late, but it's going to come out just like Lucid did with their Gravity. The first ones out are going to be high spec, high expense Rivian R2s. Then you'll get to the more of the midpoint and lower point R2s, like what I would want, probably in 2027. 2027 is when the Lucid mid-sized is going to be coming out. That's when the T3 will be coming out, which I think we agree is going to be some type of Ranger-esque kind of vehicle. Maybe you see a Bronco Sport, maybe you see like a, some of the smaller, when they talk about utilities, that's the thing, like, the Ford Edge, whatever modernization of that, multiple powertrains, a skateboard design, 800 volt architecture, and then, some plug-in hybrids, some straight battery. And then when you get into the Super Duties and the F-150s, that's when they're going with the Series hybrid. So all of that kind of stuff, right? That is all the stuff that we're going to see in 2027. And until then, it just kind of, I guess, makes it so that I don't have I'm not tempted by anything, right? There's nothing that's going to change on the 25, the 26 Lightning that's going to tempt me to start from scratch and trade it in. I'm going to wait and see what the
get worse. You know, it looks like
right.
every year model is getting worse, and because they're trying to cut corners to save more money. But you know, if the vehicle with all the features doesn't sell unless you drop the price significantly, you know, hey, we shaved 3,000 of features off, and now we can sell the vehicle for $2,000 cheaper. Doesn't do anything. You know, the price needs to be $20,000 less. Like they said on the call, the EVs are $30,000 too expensive, and it's the truth. And the Pro would sell if they could release it at $39,000. But how do you get to that point? And that's the question.
Yep. So that's where we are, I think, guys. Hopefully this was great and informative for you guys. Josh, I sent you the link so you can put that in the description. For that guide is like 15, 20 pages long. It goes through meticulously in detail all the different things that are available if anybody wants to go through and page through that. And yeah, it'll be, I love my truck. I have no need to trade it in for anything. I think it just solidifies that, you know, the next one will be the R2 for my wife, and I can wait and see what's coming in the future. Scout was another one you mentioned, 2027. It'll take a technology leap and a technology jump. And by that time, my truck will be paid for and paid off. And you know, until then, I just don't think anything's going to tempt me. So if you've already got a Lightning, honestly, there's nothing coming around the corner. This is what you got, is as good as it's going to get. Feel good about what you bought, and you know, wait till 2027. If you need something sooner, yeah, you're looking at Chevy if you want the range. You're looking at Cybertruck if you want the technology. You're otherwise you're just kind of waiting. And I still think the Ford Lightning is the best value of all of them. I don't regret a thing. It's still the choice I would make today if I was choosing. I just don't think there's anything, but you know, I'm a value customer. I don't need the long range. I don't need the bougie Sierra. You know, so for me, I'm well placed for where I'm at. I got a good value for what I got. And now the rest of it is wait and see for the market.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chris. I mean, after driving the Silverado, I don't know if I've mentioned this. After driving the Silverado and seeing the range efficiency that dipped because of how heavy the vehicle was, you know, for me, I don't need that much range unless I was towing, and I think it's a great tower. But for me, if I could get 350 range, if I built a perfect EV, 350 range, 800 volt architecture, so I could charge quickly, and if I can get the you know, the features and amenities that are in a Lightning or the size of a Lightning and similar features, then that would be my kind of perfect EV. People don't want to drive 6 hours straight. I mean, maybe they do, but you know, for me, if I can drive 3.5, 4 hours and take a 15-minute break and get all the charge I need to get back on the road, I'd be tickled and ready to go. And you know, by the time you stretch your legs and use the restroom, you're ready to go. And so I think that and Jim mentioned that, I think, on a previous call, is, you know, that we had the whole conversation around how big is your bladder. You know, I think that's a good niche, but the question is that still going to be within Ford's initiative to kind of keep, you know, I think for him that might mean 250 range, you know, for this T3 selection, like I mentioned. But, you know, for me, I do like that 350 because the other variable is the weather and the cold, and
for sure
those things do factor in. I mean, it's winter here in East Tennessee, and I wake up every day. If I full charge, my range is 260. It's not 320. And that's, you know, something you have to deal with, which around town commute doesn't matter. But if I truck off on a work trip, the Silverado then sounds nice because the reduced range, you still get that 300, 350. So keeping it to where the battery's efficient and is able to maximize and get you that range the best possible available. And then moving forward and having that. But that's where I see the Scout truck. And from the looks of it from afar, that kind of has all of those pieces, but we're still 2 years away. So the question is, how does Ford adapt with that? How will Scout enter the scene and with cost competitiveness? Who knows? I mean, that's something we don't really know yet. And what are other OEMs going to do in this space with all the political FUD that's been taking place over the last 2 months? But tying into you know, the OEM's initiatives and investments they've made, how does, you know, a Scout facility, Rivian, GM, with all of their different roadmaps of how they're executing their EV plans. How does all of that play out over the next 6 to 12 months? It's an interesting thing to see, and kind of curious to see how they begin to pivot into their new directions. But obviously today's been heavily spotlighting Ford and seeing kind of their viewpoint shift more to EREV on the larger scale, and BEV maybe on the mid to smaller scale. But it's interesting to see how that works, and I guess we'll keep an eye on the ongoing bits and pieces of that.
Absolutely, more to come.
All right, well, this has been another insightful and semi-depressing episode of Turn Down for What. Thank you so much for staying with us for this full hour. If you have, and if you haven't, shame on you. But no, like and subscribe to our channel. We post regular content. We've been doing some EV reviews. So if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Music or Apple Podcasts, go to YouTube and you can subscribe to us there, because we have some EV reviews and some different things that we are posting on there, because it's visuals that you can't get while listening to a podcast driving down the road. But yeah, like and subscribe. We are opening up on our YouTube channel some memberships and some opportunities to get some special features and chat opportunities in some of our upcoming live streams. And yeah, a lot of stuff happening with Turn Down for What. So stay tuned. Like and subscribe.
Also, if you have any questions about the upcoming ACT that will be in Anaheim, California this year, be sure to ask questions on it. The Turn Down for What team will be at that event. We're going to be looking at all the Class 8 trucks and all the other things. There's a lot of stuff that's on schedule for that. So if you've not looked, go ahead and look. And if there's anything in particular you have an interest in, let us know, and we will do our best to get that question answered while we're there.
I heard the federal government was shutting that down too, right?
Don't even. I don't.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, it's all good. We're doing good. We're excited to go to that event and kind of see where these companies are. We were there last year. There was so much stuff. We spent 3 days and probably got to half of it just looking at it. So that we're going to go and try to dive in and get as much knowledge and interviews as we can in to share with everybody on the podcast. So stay tuned for that. We'll have more of that stuff coming soon. But yeah, thank you for tuning in. Tune in next week for more EV news and updates.
See you guys.
Thanks for tuning in to Turn Down for What. Make sure you're subscribed with your notifications on to tune in to more EV news and updates. See you next time.